I'm here in a place that some would consider the wilderness. This is East Salem at Brown Road Park. It's a neighborhood park, and maybe you drove by it, or maybe you drive by it a lot and you never notice it. It's because it's the wilderness. You don't really go over East Salem unless you want to find something. You don't just stumble upon it. But I think it's in the wilderness that we actually find life. This is actually the home of 30 community garden plots. And this used to be completely vacant, this space here. And there was a sign that said, future site of neighborhood park, except the sign was there for a long time. It had mold growing on it, had grime, and just, it kind of didn't give you much hope. But there was a neighbor that walked by and decided, I want to do something about this, and began to show up at neighborhood association meetings and begin to ask questions and began to get involved. And lo and behold, a couple months later, many people begin to gather around in East Salem off Brown Road to develop this park to where now 30 families get to grow their own food and support their family through the community garden plot here. And I think it's in the wilderness that we find life. And we see that in the Bible with Mark's gospel, which just means good news. But Mark is unique because the way he starts his good news about Jesus is unlike Matthew and Luke. And if you know much about the Bible, or if you know much about Christmas, a lot of the beginning of Matthew and Luke is all about baby Jesus. Christmas, for a lot of people, it's all about baby Jesus. But I like how Mark, who writes a whole story of Jesus' life, starts his good news in the wilderness. Because I think Mark was being intentional. Because in the wilderness, you find life. Let me read the start of Mark. It's in Mark chapter 1, verse 4. It says, John the Baptizer appeared in the wilderness, proclaiming a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. And people from the whole Judean countryside and all the people of Jerusalem were going out to him and were baptized by him in the river Jordan, confessing their sins. Now it's interesting, you need to hear a couple things, that John the Baptizer is a relative of Jesus. Some would say he's a cousin of Jesus. And the way that Mark starts this whole good news and account of Jesus is with his cousin in the wilderness. And who do you find in the wilderness? You find people from the countryside and people from Jerusalem. People from the outskirts of the city. They're country folk. Then you find people that are in the downtown area, city folk. But they all come to the wilderness. Because in the wilderness, everybody's on the same playing field. In the wilderness, everybody sticks out. Now, if you live in the country and you go into the city, you're probably going to stick out a little bit because maybe you're wearing boots, maybe you've got a big belt buckle, maybe your truck is really big, and in the city they have compact car parking spots. It's really annoying if you have a truck. And you stick out like a sore thumb if you're a country boy or country girl going in the city. The same is true for city people. If you're a city person and you go out in the country, your Prius doesn't do so well in the mud on the farm. Your outfit looks different than people who live in the country. But in the wilderness, everybody sticks out. Everybody is on the same playing field. And I think that's where life can be heard. And life is what we find here in this Gospel of Mark, just a few verses later. Check this out. In verse 9, just a few verses later, it says, in those days, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan, which would be in the wilderness where we just had read. And just as he was coming up out of the water, meaning just as he was being baptized, he saw the heavens torn apart and the Spirit descending like a dove on him. And a voice came from heaven. You are my Son, the Beloved. With you, I am well pleased. Isn't it interesting that Matthew and Luke, who talk about Jesus as Emmanuel, God with us. And then in Mark, we just read Jesus in the wilderness being baptized, and you see the heavens open up and the Spirit descending. And it's almost like God is with us in that moment in the wilderness. And he's saying things like, you are my beloved. With you, I am well pleased. Like there's these words of life that are spoken into Jesus in the wilderness. And I think this Christmas, this season where a lot of things feel different. Maybe it feels like you're in the wilderness. Whether you're rich or whether you're poor, we all have the same circumstances that we have to deal with COVID being a real threat or fear, or mask or distancing being placed on everybody. Everybody's at a level field. Now, not everybody has the same reactions or responses to COVID as you maybe, but I just want us to think maybe in this season right now, you can realize that maybe this is a moment where you're in the wilderness, whether you're coming from the city or from the country. And God has a word for you. And it's this: you are my beloved. With you, I am well pleased. Like that's how the good news starts in the Gospel of Mark. Not baby Jesus, but with Jesus being baptized in the wilderness. And I pray for you today, and I pray a blessing over you today, that you would know that you are God's beloved and that God is well pleased with you. And if this was an encouragement to you, pass this along to someone else who might need to hear that God says that you're my beloved, and with you I am well pleased. And if you haven't already, it would do a great service to me and to our church if you would be able to like or follow or subscribe, so that you can get more content like this to encourage you and help you take your next step in your faith journey. Talk to you later.